Hello everyone. Welcome back. Even though I'm done with my Terminal Directive card series, I've been motivated, at least by this one card that we're about to present today, to do something in a similar vein. We'll do card theory, followed by a deck building around the card, and then we'll play through a game with this new deck, and then do some analysis on it. So obviously I can't call it Terminal Directive cards anymore because, well, the cards I'm about to present are from Blood and Water, not Terminal Directive. So I need your help for a catchy title for this sort of series, and if I feel motivated to continue this series on, I will do so. So yeah, let me know in the comment section if you have a catchy title. But in the meantime, we'll get down to this card, which you might have seen from the title. It's Escalate Vitriol. This is an interesting one. This is an NBN agenda that allows you to, once per turn, spend a click to gain a credit for each tag the runner has. So this is basically the core version of Mars for Martians, which is the NR card that gives them 1 credit per tag they have. Except that this is permanent. Of course, the downside is that you actually need to score this, which is not that easy since it's a 4-2, but otherwise once you have scored it, you basically get tag-based income for the rest of the game. And I think this is the very first instance of tag-based income. Reality 3D came close, but it's not enough, I think, because it's so easily disrupted by the runner. Whereas this is a lot harder to disrupt. So it's a very it breaches new design space, and I think it's really interesting design space to explore. I'm not sure how good it is though. But for one thing, it does help you fix the siphon spam matchup if you score it. This means that if they siphon you to the ground, you can still make money. If your economy is asset based and they control your economy, like Siphon Wizard's a good example of doing that, well, you still have your own economy in Escalate Vitriol if you have it in your score area. It also makes marginal mid-seasons plays a lot better. So like if you're able to exceed the runner's trace strength by 3 or 4, you're basically forcing them to actually meet the trace and lose all their credits. Otherwise, if they take a lot of tags, 20 or so, well, you're gonna get big money from Escalate Vitriol, and that can really spin the game out of hand, especially if you have Big Eyes or Psychographics to pair up with it. Speaking of Psychographics, this agenda screams Psychographics for obvious reasons. Like you can click this on your turn and then install an agenda and cycle it out on the same turn. So this is the one card that enables Psychographics the best in terms of giving you enough credits to cycle out a big agenda, such as Project Bew. But you notice that a lot of cards that I just mentioned, mid-season replacements and Project Bew, are cards that are set to rotate in the near future. So once those cards go off, I'm not sure how good Escalate Vitriol will be. That is an interesting point to note. Also, another important point to note is that this agenda does not help at all against rich tag avoiding decks such as Run-based Andromeda. These decks typically won't be floating tags because they have Aaron out and they have Temujin, which means that it's very hard to land the mid-seasons or the hard-hitting news traces on them. In that scenario, Escalate Vitriol will be a completely blank 4-2, making it rather subpar. So, speaking of agendas that punish the runner for having tags, can you think of all the NBN and neutral agendas that punish tag runners? Pause the video and list all the answers that you can think of at the top of your head. When you're ready, the answer is going to be reviewed in 3, 2, 1. Surprisingly, there are not that many. Very, very few, in fact. Of course, there's also market research, but I'm not going to present it here because it's set to rotate. But other than that, there are only 3 agendas, and 2 of which are in NBN. For a faction that's based on tags, there are surprisingly very few tag punishment agendas. In fact, this is only the second one in faction, the first being the Quantum Kitty, which is a very nice agenda. Don't get me wrong. There's also Private Security Force, which is all the way back in the core set. But that's about it. So, Escalate Vitriol, in short, really does fulfill a niche in decks that want an agenda that punishes tag runners. Maybe these decks have a very good way of landing tags, almost guaranteeing it every single game, but just need an agenda that supports punishing the runner. So yeah, if Private Security Force isn't up your alley, Escalate Vitriol might just be. So what sort of deck is this? Well, I propose a CTM deck because it is quite obvious that if you want to guarantee that the runner is tagged, what you really want is CTM, because this is how you are going to be able to get the money in order to land those hard-hitting news tracers, that mid-season trace. CTM is really the only reliable way to do this. Otherwise, you are at the mercy of strong runner economy with the likes of Magnum Opus, Temujin, and the upcoming Blue Moose. These are very big economy cards that NBN just cannot keep up with. As you notice, my deck is very similar to standard CTM. Of course, because of this, there's a lot of room for refinement. I can see a lot of things that are missing from this deck, like Sand City Grid, Third Party and Data Raven are probably good includes as well. Maybe a second Data Ward, maybe a second Toll Booth, but whatever the case is, we're just going to experiment with this shell for now. As mentioned, it's very reliant on the be damned if you do, damned if you don't fork. If the runner chooses to contest your assets, they'll get swept up in tags by hard-hitting news, and once you score Vitriol, even if they control your assets, you're still getting money. On the other hand, if they do ignore your assets, well, they're going to get hit by the very big mid-seasons, and there's nothing they can do about it. Even Film Critic won't save them because there are 3 MCA informants in this deck. So yeah, let's see how this plays out. We'll be doing a playthrough right now. Alright, we're up against Edward Kim. Dear oh dear. I mean, at least it's not Wizard, but well, Edward Kim. He has a link! So good. Alright, so I can't keep my opening hand because it has a Sensei Actors Union. While my opponent money's up, I get the turn 1 Sensei Fire. So good. I mean turn 2, sorry. Yep. I can't play the Sweet Sweep from my hand because my opponent smartly ducks it by being low on hand size, and I draw into another Sensei Actors Union, so that's getting plopped down the table right away. Now my opponent drops a Peddler and contests the Sensei. This is always the right play, do it. Even if it means that it lands you in hard-hitting news range, you really cannot afford to give the runner another Sensei Fire. Unfortunately, my opponent does. There are 2 Senseis in the deck, and I found them both in, the top 10 cards. Really lucky there. But this just shows you why Sensei is worth 3 influence. It is that good. Yeah. Okay, so I play a Jackson here, and that allows me to ditch Global Food. What I actually intend to do here is to recycle the Sensei Actors Unions with Jackson Howard. If I can do that, I will be able to threaten my remotes a lot more seriously. So now my opponent finally draws up to hand size, which allows me to play the Sweep Sweep. I also draw into a very important card in Toll Booth. This will allow me to start constructing a secure remote to score agendas with. So I'm gonna drop Jackson Howard. Drop the Toll Booth under Jackson Howard and quickly use the Jackson Howard. In case my opponent's running Rumor Mill, no influence has been shown yet. I'd rather get those 4 agenda points in the bin out of the way. Next turn, I'll be looking to rush out Escalate Vitriol, unless I draw into some form of tag punishment, namely close accounts. In which case I'll go for the breaking news instead. I don't, so let's score the Escalate Vitriol. Get that out of the way and we'll see how much work it does this game. My opponent, in the meantime, will have to respect the possibility of this being breaking news, which is bad news bears. So right now they'll probably try to offshore some of their credits. And maybe protect against Boom if they think I'm running Boom, but I think my opponent doesn't think so. So yeah, my opponent injects and sees an immolation script. This is a very interesting deck. So I can immediately tell this is a very anarchish deck. There's ice trashing in immolation script, and Parasite, you bet they have cutlery as well. A lot of spicy stuff in my opponent's deck. Of course, they face check the Toll Booth here, and I make them pay for 3 credit toll. So they can't get in, and they know that something really bad is going to happen with their agenda score. The good news is the worst thing that can happen at this point is probably closed accounts. There's no exchange of information threat here. So my opponent runs HQ, and this is a pretty good place for my opponent to dump credits. They can dump 3 credits on the resistor trace before they get their accounts closed. Obviously we know the closed accounts isn't happening, but they can run HQ, and bonk! Edward Kim hits the MC Informant. Ouch. Well, MC Informant's not that important in the Anarch matchup unless they're playing something like Aaron Marone. Otherwise, yeah, it's more for the criminals and shapers that pack cards like Film Critic and Aaron Marone. So now I finally do score an Escalate Vitriol, which really threatens my opponent. If they decide to go tag me, they know that I won't be poor. I rest the other resistor on R&D, and it turns out my opponent doesn't seem to have a solution for it. No Parasite, no Paperclip. So yeah, my Centrals are going to be safe for now. I don't think that's going to last very long, however. So I would really like to find some extra ice before my opponent begins tearing open my Centrals. Edward Kim poses a very unique sort of pressure on HQ and R&D. Especially for a deck that is reliant on combo pieces like CTM. You want your psychographics, your mid-seasons, your all these cards. You really do not want your opponent to get access to HQ. The last thing I want is to have the mid-seasons bonked out of my hand. My opponent finds a Temujin, good for them. So now they actually have the economy lead over me, and I cannot threaten mid-seasons. This Archangel placement is going to be rather crucial here. I would like to place it somewhere, just not sure just yet. Yep, so yeah, I decide to actually play the Jackson Howard from my hand, and then place it on Archives because I respect the Temujin threat. I do not want my opponent getting free Temujins, and my opponent runs my Jackson. I don't mind them trashing it because they will incur the CTM trace, and I have another Jackson in my deck anyway. But of course, they have more It's my mid-seasons. Oh, even though my opponent doesn't have access to my hand, they still are able to snipe the mid-seasons with more. That is so annoying. But they do end up hitting the Archangel on Archives, and this is really good news for me because now they have the expensive Maw installed. They have to beat the Archangel trace, whereas without the Maw, they would be more than happy to run through Archives. I would not like to bounce. I mean, the bounces are pretty trivial between the two pillars, the Sucker and the Temujin that's running out soon. So yeah, I find a hard-hitting news here, but do I have enough money? I don't. I have barely enough. I'm not able to outtrace my opponent there, especially not considering they have one link, so the trace will have to wait. In the meantime, I'm going to ice up HQ here so that my opponent doesn't get Edward hammering Kim into my HQ. Unfortunately, there's no way I can stop Maw from triggering because I have too many open remotes. So they are going to get not only a Maw trigger, but bloody hell, an Aeneas Informant as well. So while mawing my psychographics, my opponent actually managed to actually get a credit from the Aeneas as well. Once again, my opponent still has more money than me, so I was forced to use Jackson to play Hedge Fund, play Sweeps Week. Now I have enough credits to threaten hard-hitting news. But what I really want to do is, if you remember, I sneakily snuck in a breaking news in the Toll Booth remote, and I finally find my close accounts. I'm just hoping my opponent doesn't maw my close accounts here, because this would be a very prime opportunity to bankrupt my opponent. Thankfully, they hit the breaking news. I didn't really need that, so next turn my opponent's gonna get a very nasty surprise. Not very much a surprise. Let's face it, Anarch should always be expecting this. The breaking news into close accounts combo. So strong. Even though I'm not running all 3 copies of breaking news, this is still a very important combo to have because if your opponent gets too far ahead of you with cards like Temujin Contract, you really do need the breaking news into close accounts combo to reset things. We have not received any new tools on NBN side that allow NBN to regain the credit lead if the runner gets too far ahead with Temujin or Magnum Opus. So close accounts and breaking news is one of the few proactive ways in which you can do that. So yep, there we go. My opponent's now on 0 credits, and now I'm looking to take the lead. Also, I think, unfortunately, my opponent's more, and they have more Aeneas Informants now. 2 Aeneas Informants and a more means that every single turn they can get Opus money. I mean, yeah, 2 Aeneas Informants is basically a single Magnum Opus, and on top of that, they're getting more triggers as well every single turn. That is not acceptable because my opponent missed my hard-hitting news. I am going to punish them. So far, I've been very, very lucky with the Maw Mills. The only loss so far that was of any concern was 1 copy of Psychographics, which I don't really need just yet. So this is a perfect window for me to land the hard-hitting news, but given that my opponent can clear all 4 tags, I want to take advantage of this window by scoring a project build while at it. So I slide the build under the Toll Booth and then proceed to hard-hitting news my opponent. Yep. So at this juncture, they must ask themselves whether they want to float tags for the rest of the game or do they want to clear the tags now. Because if they clear the tags, they can still get back in the game. With double Aeneas Informant, they get Opus money every turn, so that's still pretty good. But after some deliberation, my opponent decided that clearing the tags here would be too much tempo loss, and if it really is an agenda, an Astro or a Beo under that toll booth, that's game if they don't go for it. Plus, they have 5 Data Sucker tokens, so this was a perfect opportunity for my opponent to actually Deja Vu for Parasite and run through the toll booth. So my bluff has been called, my opponent does go for the agenda instead, and yep, that means they're going to float tags for the rest of the game. They get another tag from CTM Tracing from destroying the toll booth. But I do not get to score my agenda, so that's good for my opponent in the short term. Unfortunately for my opponent, because they have not been very good on their accesses, they are nowhere near match point, so I'm not that worried about my opponent winning just yet, especially with double resistor on centrals. Those centrals feel very, very safe right now. I prioritize trashing the Aeneas Informant here, just one copy. My opponent can have the other copy, that's fine. A single Aeneas Informant is basically worthless. It only has minus synergy with my opponent's deck because they have more installed, which means that on their first remote run each turn, they're getting a credit and a more trash, so that's pretty good for them. But otherwise, a single Aeneas Informant is of no consequence to me whatsoever. My opponent forces me to use the Jackson. I'm gonna recycle my tag punishments cards here now that my opponent is perma-tagged. I will also try to win via Psychographics. There's another copy of Psychographics in my hand, however... Oh, no, don't do this! Oh, no. Terrible, terrible card. Even though my opponent is supposed to be losing, I don't see a way I can win just yet. My toll booth is in the bin. I don't have a secure remote setup to score agendas, and my main win con is Psychographics, but my opponent's playing Anarch and they're disrupting my Psychographics with these stupid more trashes. I can't do much about that. I can't jam this food anywhere else. I'm feeling kind of stuck. Sooner or later, this food is going in the bin because more! And I can't put it in Naked Remote because my opponent's always going to check Naked Remotes. I can't ice it up because my ice doesn't end the run. I cannot feed my opponent agendas at this point, and I'm only drawing more and more agendas right now. So this is a very desperate move here. There's a very high chance my opponent actually does a very nasty thing to me right now. They are definitely going to trigger more on their turn, and if they hit the 1 in 5 Jackson Howard in my hand, I'm going to have no recursion left for the rest of the game. I'm going to be stuck with 2 agendas in my hand. Thankfully, my opponent missed the Jackson Howard, instead hitting the Project BU, so I can recur it with Jackson later on. Right now, I'm going to get my Jackson out of the way before my opponent maws it. It's my last copy of Jackson, so this is why I'm very, very concerned about it. Now I see Sensei Actors Union here. This is going to be a very powerful card for bottoming agendas as well. But I think my first concern here was to remove the sheer number of agendas in my hand. That is a very nasty thing because this is the one way my opponent can win. To maul all the agendas in my HQ into the bin and then run archives for the win. We don't want that, so we get the Jackson out of the way, get the agendas out of the way, and now we can focus on trying to win. I have a Beo in my hand that can be scored behind an Enigma, I guess, but I do know my opponent might have a York in their hand and they do actually have enough credits to install it. So I guess, yeah, I kind of have to go for it here. Either they bankrupt themselves installing the York and getting my Beo, or I get away scot-free and then able to score the Beo, putting me up at 5 points and hopefully buying me a bit more time to find more end-around ice for my remote. The most important thing is I need to stall out the game now to find my bigger pieces of ice. There is a Data Ward somewhere in my deck, there's another Resistor somewhere in my deck. These ice are going to be really good for securing my remote. Getting a close accounts will be cherry on the cake as well because that opens up a scoring window for me. So I throw out all the cards that are very important that I need to get away from my hand before my opponent maws them away, and those are the Sensei Actors Union and the Beo. So now my opponent runs second click, which means that they cannot get to the Beo in the server. And when I begin my turn, I fire Sensei Actors Union, which my opponent didn't check. I find the Psychographics. Even though my opponent only has 5 tags, because I have the Beo pre-installed, I can cycle for 5 and double advance for a 7 advanced Beo that's worth 4 points, and that seals the deal perfectly. Whew! Wow. That maul was so disruptive. I'm not sure if I would have been able to win the game had the maul triggers gone any worse for me. So here's the list of things Escalate Vitriol did for me this game. Yeah, nothing. Why? Why do we even play this agenda in that case? Well, some of you might say, hey, well, nothing went wrong. Your deck did exactly what it was supposed to do. I mean, the rest of your deck, for that is. So Escalate Vitriol didn't need to pull its weight. But is that really the case? I'm not sure about that. Maybe I can change my deck construction such that it can make better use of Escalate Vitriol. As you may have noticed, the reason why Escalate Vitriol was basically useless this game was not because my opponent didn't get tagged. They did, in fact. I could have clicked for 5 credits. The problem was that, my opponent just couldn't contest the mass of pair campaigns and NASACs I had installed and res. So with that amount of drip economy, I never needed Escalate Vitriol's money. So maybe what I should do is to invest more in clunkier eyes, expensive stuff that I can dump credits into, besides just psychographics. So more data wards, more toll booths maybe? The problem is, by doing so, you're compromising your early game, and this is quite bad because early on, and even to the mid game, before the runner gets tagged, you need the money not just to defend your servers, but also to threaten hard-hitting news, mid-seasons. You can't be spending this money on your ice, and the fewer cheap ice you have, the more likely you are to get assaulted by cards like Account Siphon. So maybe another way to go about this is to reduce the number of Vitriols in your deck. After all, if I'm not able to use Vitriol even in a game where I successfully managed to land a hard-hitting news, I think that will be the case for most other games as well. In fact, Vitriol is probably a key card only in the credit denial matchup, where they do deny your asset economy. So in that case, why not just play 2 Vitriol? You can still reliably find one of your Vitriols to psychographics out in the Siphon Spam matchup, and for everyone else, just play the third play an Astroscript instead of the third Vitriol. Astroscript is so much more universal of an agenda, and it's not just because of the better ratio, 3-2 as opposed to the 4-2 of Vitriol, but the effect is just so much more universal. An advancement token can be used no matter what matchup you're up against, especially considering that the deck was built with project builds and breaking users to boot. So that's how you improve your deck. Sometimes it's not about playing 3 copies of the cards that you are trying to try out. Although this was a very good conclusion that we made from this video. Hopefully you have had more success with Escalate Vitriol. If you had, please do share in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. And in the meantime, as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Happy net running.